Good evening, everyone, and welcome to COS at Home. I am your host, Jonathan Viod, and thank you for joining us for another exciting program. Tonight, we have a powerful video to share with you during our 5 for 5 segment. We also have a vitally important action to share with you during Action at Home. For our interview segment of the program, we are excited to be joined by the primary author of our COS resolution in Texas, State House Representative Cody Vasut. Now, I will also let y'all know up front that tonight's episode is in the rare category because it was pre-recorded. That's right, the entire episode is pre-recorded this evening. As you know, we endeavor to make this show live on the first Wednesday of every month. However, today is Ash Wednesday, and I'm probably on my way home from church as we speak. So in order for us to bring this to you smoothly and without any issues, we thought it best to pre-record. So thank you for your understanding, and I promise we will be back live in April. For anyone that is new to the show and organization, I want to take a minute to welcome you to Convention of States. We are a grassroots movement focused on the goal of utilizing Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution for proposing amendments that would impose fiscal restraints on the federal government, reduce the size and scope of the federal government, and place term limits on all members of Congress and federal officials. In order to hold this convention, we need 34 states to pass our resolution, and to date, 19 states have done so. So we're really excited that you're here, and we're glad that you're joining us. But I realize that I start each show explaining our goal, but I have not been doing a good enough job of stating to you what our mission is. And the mission at Convention of States is that we are more than a convention. In fact, if you look at our buttons that are out there in the field, you'll even see that it says self-governance at the top and more than a convention near the bottom. And that is epitomized by the mission statement, which is to build the largest engaged army of self-governing grassroots activists in American history. Or the way I prefer to put it is to reestablish or restore a culture of self-governance. Our founders built a system of governance that was dependent on an active and educated citizenry. Sadly, we Americans have allowed the comfort and distractions of everyday life to prevent us from doing our duty. Convention of States is focused on changing that and reigniting the fire of liberty in every American citizen. We hope that you will join us, and thank you for being here this evening. Okay, let's go ahead and get started with 5 for 5. Okay, so tonight for 5 for 5, which, by the way, this segment is where we spend 5 minutes educating you about Article 5 or Convention of States. So tonight we have a powerful video that shows you the leadership of Convention of States compared to the self-proclaimed leaders of our opposition. We constantly receive pointed questions in legislatures about who it is that is behind COS. So Producer G has the answer for everyone. Check this out.
Michael Farris, Rick Santorum, Mark Meckler, and Robert Nadelson are the proven trusted leaders spearheading the Convention of States movement. Constitutional attorney Michael Farris has argued before the appellate courts of 13 states, 8 federal circuit courts of appeals, and twice before the Supreme Court of the United States. He's one of the few living attorneys who has successfully litigated an Article 5 case. As the founder of the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, Farris spearheaded the effort to legalize homeschooling in all 50 states. He also founded Patrick Henry College, the preeminent pre-law college in America, where he taught law for 18 years. He served as president of Alliance for Defending Freedom, the preeminent religious liberty organization in America. ADF won 11 of 12 Supreme Court cases on his watch. ADF was also co-counsel for winning the Dobbs case, overturning Roe v. Wade. Farris was co-chairman of the drafting committee for the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. He's also written a peer-reviewed law article proving the 1787 convention acted appropriately and lawfully. The Honorable Rick Santorum is senior advisor for Convention of States. Senator Santorum was a candidate for the Republican nomination for president in 2012 and 2016, winning the 2012 Iowa caucuses, 10 additional states, and nearly 4 million votes. Prior to his campaigns for president, Rick served 2 terms in both the House of Representatives and Senate, where he gained a reputation as one of the nation's leading fighters for fiscal responsibility and the right to life. Robert G. Nadelson, a law professor of 25 years, Nadelson's research has been cited repeatedly at the U.S. Supreme Court, federal appeals courts, and state Supreme Courts. both by parties and by state and federal judges and justices. He is widely acknowledged to be the nation's preeminent scholar on the Article 5 convention process, having written the only legal treatise on the subject. Nadelson heads the Independence Institute's Constitutional Studies Center and its Article 5 Information Center. Attorney Mark Meckler co-founded the largest Tea Party group in America before co-founding Convention of States Action. As president, Mark has led the organization to have a grassroots presence in all 7,000 plus state legislative districts in the nation. He frequently appears in the media as a voice for everyday Americans. He also stood up to the IRS when it targeted Tea Party groups and led a successful lawsuit against the IRS, winning a substantial settlement benefiting local Tea Party groups. The leaders opposing Convention of States Action?
It provides for, among other horrors, setting up a parliament over the United States, Canada, and Mexico.
Joanna Martin, aka Joanna Scutari, who also blogs and speaks under the pseudonym Publius Hulda. A former attorney, she married a white supremacist Frank Scutari after he was convicted of aiding and abetting Richard Scutari with crimes related to armed robbery, the Allenberg murder, the Aryan Nations, and other anti-government groups. Robert Owens is program director for the John Birch Society. As an attorney, he made news in 2022 when the Ohio Supreme Court suspended him and a Delaware County grand jury indicted him on 6 counts of felony theft. Owens is facing criminal investigations due to deceitful and dishonest conduct, failing to communicate, and failing to provide a timely refund to 4 separate clients. Robert Brown, another program director for the John Birch Society. Unlike Owens or Scutari, Brown has never been an attorney, although he does talk out of both sides of his mouth. After claiming to be a nationally known expert and scholar before multiple state legislatures.
I am a nationally known constitutional scholar. As a constitutional scholar with a particular interest in the Article 5 Convention.
He later admitted that he has no credentials.
I don't pretend to have any particular credentials other than the fact that I have a very rare quality that I have the ability to read.
None of these opponents have written anything scholarly on the subject of the Article 5 Convention, but they parade around different state legislatures as if they have special knowledge or expertise. Convention of States leaders are proven, lifelong, principled fighters for liberty, battle-tested and refined by the fire. They have accomplished big things in the battle for freedom, proving their credibility. Who do you trust?
Wow. I don't really think there's much more to be said after that video, to be perfectly honest with you. I couldn't add anything to it. Producer G, again, just did an amazing job. So I'm just going to let it speak for itself. And with that, let's hear about the latest COS news from across the country. And to do so, I'll turn it over to Rachel Martin with COS Now.
On this week's episode of COS Now, the Convention of States movement is making waves across the country. Kansas just made history, and COS legislation is gaining traction in multiple states. From packed hearings to major legislative wins, we'll be breaking down all the latest victories and what comes next on COS Now.
What do we want? When do we want it? Now!
Welcome to another episode of COS Now, the show where we break down all the latest news in the Convention of States movement. I'm your host, Rachel Martin, and we've got a lot of good news to cover today. Before we do, make sure that you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell. First up, Convention of States scored an unprecedented victory in the Kansas Senate. For the first time ever, the Kansas Senate successfully adopted the resolution with a vote of 29-11. Here's the lead legislative champion for COS in Kansas, Senator Thompson.
We are at wit's end with the out-of-control federal government and our inability to control it in any way, even through elections. And so Article 5 provides us the only relief that we have. The founders put it into the Constitution for a purpose. Even though it hasn't been exercised yet, it is a purpose that is important and necessary
The resolution still needs to move through the House side of the Kansas legislature, but this historic milestone signals great momentum for the COS Kansas team. Earlier in the week, the Wyoming House Education Committee heard public testimony on COS Action's Article 5 application. Here's a COS volunteer testifying in favor.
The biggest problem is people confuse Convention of States to propose amendments as to automatically changing the Constitution. We got together, 800 of us, and said, we're going to take away the Second Amendment. Would you guys go with that? No. Neither will anybody else. It's to propose amendments. The states have the final say-so. People are smart. A lot of politicians in Washington think we're not. People are. And when you get them together, we come up with good ideas. And this whole thing here, it literally is just to get us together to propose amendments to help control the federal government.
Unfortunately, we received word late Friday night that the Wyoming House voted down COS by a vote of 25 to 32. The COS Wyoming team got so close to victory, and we want to congratulate them on their progress. Their hard work is sure to pay off in a future session. Meanwhile, on Wednesday, the Iowa House State Government Committee also advanced our Article 5 application to the House floor with a vote of 10 to 7, clearing the way for debate in the full Iowa House. Later that day, a committee in Nebraska heard from the public on why the unicameral should pass a clean resolution with no expiration date. COS President Mark Meckler was on the ground in Lincoln to provide expert testimony.
Y'all passed this particular application several years ago, and the intent to be here today is to remove the sunset clause. There are several states that passed this application with a sunset clause: Missouri, Oklahoma, Texas. Missouri and Oklahoma have both removed their sunset clause. Texas is in the process, I believe, will remove their sunset clause this session. The reason for that is we believe liberty never expires, first of all, and this is a fight for liberty. It is a fight to rebalance the jurisdiction between the federal and state governments.
But Rhode Island wouldn't allow the Midwestern states to have all the action. On Thursday evening, COS supporters showed up at a legislative hearing in consideration of our Article 5 application. To cap off the hearing, a brand new supporter had this exchange with the committee.
I had not heard about this before, so when she just gave those stats of 59% of people, I wasn't even included in that. I fully support this. I think this is a great I hadn't heard about it before, so I think if more Rhode Islanders heard about this, more Rhode Islanders would be writing into their senators and their reps in support. Somehow we need to get these guys on TV.
They're on TV right now.
Well, I mean, like out there on a billboard, on social media, because I think a lot of people don't know about this.
So I think all of us every year since this has been introduced have gotten more and more emails on the subject matter. So your work getting the word out is going somewhere.
To see more of the proceedings, you can catch up on all the events at conventionofstates.com/COS Live. And that's all for this week's recap. Thank you all for watching. Leave your thoughts in the comments down below, and I'll see you same time next week here on COS Now.
It's always pretty cool when you hear a legislator say each year we get more and more people sending in letters to us and pushing for Convention of States. I mean, that's really exciting. So well done to Rhode Island. I mean, great job by all of our teams across the nation. Once again, that video shows you the excellent work that our grassroots are putting into this movement. I'll also give a shout out to one of the states that I oversee, which is the Georgia team. We had their capital surge last week in Atlanta, and it was the largest surge that we have had with the Georgia team. Now, Georgia is going to be celebrating their anniversary of passing the COS resolution. And the reason that matters is because Georgia was state number 1. So tomorrow, March 6th, they're going to be celebrating their 11th anniversary of passing the resolution. But when we passed, we didn't have a huge grassroots team. And once you become a pass state, it's a little bit of a challenge to really grow a team because people always feel like, well, the resolution's been passed, our job is done. Of course, that's not true. That's only the first step. There's a lot more to be done. And the team has done an amazing job over the years of really being built up. I have to give a huge shout out to Joelle Lapp, our former state director, and Tony Moore, our current state director. The two of them have really done an amazing job of building up that team and building it into a bit of a family. And we had the largest surge that we had ever had last Thursday. Mark Meckler was out there. It was just a really great event. We've got some legislation that is F3 legislation. So that's legislation that promotes freedom, federalism, or fundamental rights that we are supporting there, along with other organizations like Alliance Defending Freedom and LifeWise. So we're doing everything we can. And I just want to give a shout out to the Georgia team for all of their hard work. And the last thing I just want to take a minute to note is Wyoming. So you heard Rachel mention that on Friday, ultimately we were voted down in the House, and our resolution there was defeated for this legislative session. It's very similar situation to South Dakota, right? We were able to pass through the Senate. Things were moving along. We felt pretty good. And then the House floor vote came up, and we came up a few votes shy. And just like in South Dakota, if you were to just look at that and assume that, well, zero-sum game, you lost, you guys didn't get it done, you'd be missing a huge part of the picture. And Wyoming, like with South Dakota, wasn't necessarily a state where we thought we were going to get as far as we did. And I believe this is the furthest we've ever gotten in Wyoming, just like it was the furthest we had ever gotten in South Dakota. And up until really late last week, we didn't think that leadership was going to bring our resolution up for a vote. Our team there, and a huge kudos to our state director, Julie Baker, who is, like Shirley Meyer, is a legend amongst the grassroots, has been with Convention of States for a long time and has worked really hard. It was her hard work, our lobbyists' hard work, that we were able to finally get that resolution brought up and heard on the floor, debated on the floor, and ultimately voted on. And now we have a list of who voted for us and who voted against us. And that's something that we can now work with those people who opposed us and try and bring them around and better educate them on why Convention of States and Article 5 is the solution to solving our problems. I personally feel like we have got a tremendous amount of momentum in both South Dakota and Wyoming. In fact, the way I've been describing it is we're knocking on the door in both states, and pretty soon we're going to kick that door in. So don't be too disappointed. The teams have done an amazing job. Obviously, it always sucks to lose. You don't want to lose at the end of the day. You want to be able to pass our resolution. But we are very, very close in both of those states. And I think we're going to be able to get the job done within the coming years. And it's really exciting. So I just wanted to add all of that so that this way you knew the full story as to what happened there in Wyoming. And now we have the great pleasure of welcoming Texas State House Representative and our primary author of our COS resolution, Representative Cody Vasut. How are you today, Representative Vasut?
I'm doing fine. Thanks for having me on.
It's an honor and a privilege, sir. And we really appreciate you taking the time to join us, especially with how busy things are right now during legislative session. Now, since this is your first time on COS at Home, I wanted to start by asking you the question I ask of all of our new guests. Would you share with us your COS story? When did you first learn about Article 5 and our organization, and why did you decide to step up and be our champion in Texas?
Well, I've long known about Convention of States as an organization. They're a great grassroots organization. You know, we've had the opportunity here in Texas to see them firsthand come up and testify on bills. They do a great job. So I've long known that they're a great organization. What did it for me on this specific issue is I was at the State Republican Convention in 2022, and I heard about this issue that the application for an Article 5 convention to rein in the federal government that Texas had called in 2017 was going to expire in 8 years. So that was 2025 at the time. We felt like we had a little bit of time, but they needed help. They wanted to remove that sunset provision. And I thought to myself, when I went up to their booth, I was just observing from the sidelines. I thought, well, this is easy. I mean, if an idea is good, it's a good idea for all time. And so I just walked up there, never met him before at any point in time. I just said, my name is Cody Vasut. I'm a state representative. I'll file your bill. And I don't know if they took me serious or not, but I ended up filing it last session and ran with it. And I, of course, have long supported Article 5 conventions of the state. If you're going to rein in the federal government, the states are the only vehicle to be able to do that. Congress is never going to rein itself in. We're kidding ourselves if we think Congress is ever going to do that. So, but the founding fathers gave us this option, and I think it's a great option, and I think it's always a good option and should not be subject to a sunset. So that's why I've become a champion for this issue in Texas.
That's an amazing story, and I should give kudos to our Texas team. I know they are constantly having a presence at the GOP convention. They've also had a presence at the Libertarian convention, and they did reach out to the Democrats to try to have a table there at that convention. They were not interested in having us at their convention, unfortunately, but that's an amazing story. I'm just curious, what was the reaction at the table when you walked up and said, "I'll file the bill"?
Well, I think they were a little surprised, like, oh, that's great, and probably thought, well, I mean, who the heck is this? And also, maybe, is this guy actually state representative? These conventions can be interesting things, so people can come up and say whatever. But when I filed the resolution, that's when they knew I was really serious, and I've been happy to work with them this whole time.
That's outstanding. And you have been wonderful to our grassroots activists. I know so many of them have walked through your office and talked with you. And but I want to take a minute to kind of take a step back, if you don't mind. I'm sure some folks at home may be a little confused as to why we're even talking about Texas. After all, it's a past state, so nothing to see here, right? Sadly, it's not that simple. That's not the case. For those of you who may not know the story of Texas, we passed our resolution there in 2017. In fact, I would encourage you to check out a series that we have with Convention of States hosted by Jake Fay called The Story of, where he goes through the history of passing the resolution in Texas. That was the most recent program. Now, unfortunately, when our resolution was passed, another resolution with an expiration date or sunset clause or automatic repeal of the resolution after 8 years was also passed. So if you're doing the math in your head, and as Representative Vasut mentioned there a minute ago, 2017 was when we passed. That was 8 years ago. So we must address the expiration date this year in 2025. So Representative Vasut, I know you've worked to help us address it. You tried 2 years ago. We tried to get either remove it or extend it. And although we passed through the full Senate and through committee in the House, a clerical error at the end of session prevented us from having a floor vote in the House. If you would you describe for us what you felt in that moment when the point of order was raised in 2023?
Well, that was, of course, very frustrating, but that is kind of the nature of the House. If we had it a little bit sooner in session, we could have corrected that error. But where we were right at the end for second readings for bills, so we were kind of where we were, right? And fortunately, we had a couple years to be able to take another run at it. And I think, though, that what this shows is that when you've got a good idea, don't put a sunset clause on it. And because you invariably have to spend time going back through it again. We just need to have this one and done and ready to go, and always be ready, willing, and able as the state of Texas to step in and say, we're going to join our sister states in reining in the federal government.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I can understand there being sunset clauses to things that maybe you're trying something or you're experimenting with something. But with this, when you're calling for an Article 5 convention, it would seem that you, regardless of what goes on, you want to see that convention called to at least have a conversation, right? At a convention, we're not necessarily seeing action taken. It's really for the states to have a conversation, and then if they agree on a particular proposal that they think should be added as an amendment to the Constitution, they send it back to the states to decide. So it seems like you wouldn't want to have a sunset clause added to that, because ultimately, if a convention gets called, it's just to have a conversation. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. I think the idea of the states gathering together to consider amendments to rein in the federal government is a good idea, and it's going to be a good idea today. It's going to be a good idea in 8 years. It's going to be a good idea in 20 years. Hopefully it doesn't take that long. But naturally it's pretty difficult to amend the United States Constitution for good reason. And it takes 34 states right now out of our 50 to call this convention. So it takes some time to get 34 states. And so we should always be ready whenever that moment comes to be able to respond and go there and chat and discuss these issues. And if we can have agreement of those delegates, great. If not, hey, the status quo remains, right? So there's no downside in removing a sunset and always being ready and willing to go.
Well said. And I thank you for taking a minute for us to kind of set the scene for everyone and explain why we are where we are here in Texas. And again, we really appreciate all of your hard work in 2023. And it was just a disappointing result, but this is why we wanted to get it done then, so that this way we had opportunity or extra time for us to address it. And that's what we're doing now. And we have Senate Joint Resolution 54 that is filed in the Senate. But your resolution is House Joint Resolution 98 filed in the House, and it has 54 primary and co-authors, which is the most of any bill or resolution that has been filed this session. What are the next steps with this resolution?
So we should have it referred to a committee this week, probably today. Worst case, I think maybe tomorrow or Thursday. We've requested a particular committee for it to go to. regardless of what committee it goes to. I think we have the votes on the committees. And so a referral is the next step. As soon as we get it referred to the committee, we'll request a public hearing and have a public hearing on the bill, probably within 2 to 3 weeks. And then we need to get it to the House floor and get it passed out of the House and passed out of the Senate by early May. I think our deadline's the first week of May. I've been operating under the assumption, let's get it done by May 1 and play it safe.
I love that approach. So now we mentioned 54 representatives have signed on to this resolution as an author in some form. There are 150 members in the Texas House, so that's still 96 that have not jumped on to provide authorship to the resolution. Of course, there are many of those who, even though they haven't signed on, they are supporters and they will vote in favor of our resolution. But there are still many that are on the fence or opposed. So I'm curious, Representative Vasut, what are the reasons they provide to you for keeping their powder dry, if you will? And what are some of the reasons that they have not agreed to support it or may be cautious about the resolution and Article 5 in general?
I've had very few tell me that they're cautious or have concerns. There are a handful. I don't think anyone has told me that they oppose it. Particularly within the Republican caucus. I think you have a large number that are thinking about it. They might be newer members and haven't heard of this issue, so they need to digest it. We do have a large freshman class, larger than normal. And so there's some of that. There's also those that just don't like to co-author bills, and I can respect that. But they're going to vote for it, right? Just like you said, I'm very confident. We've already run the numbers. We've got more than 76 votes. So, this is just a matter of bringing it up for a vote. But for those that are not on board, and I'd love to have everybody on board, this is a bipartisan issue. The last time it passed in 2017, it was bipartisan. It should be bipartisan again. This is not about who's in the White House or who's in Congress, which party, which people. This is simply about the issues. Now, on the issues, some of the questions I get are concerns about the process. They've never thought about Article 5. What does it mean? How many states does it take to call it? How many does it take to pass it? And perhaps the one that I hear the most is, well, what happens if the delegates get there and they propose an amendment? And I always go with the most maybe out there one, right? They decide to abolish the Second Amendment, right? What are we going to do? Oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And they'll point back to the first, Constitution, the Articles of Confederation, and how those were changed, right? But I think the response to that, and I might be preempting one of your questions later, but look, this is a very difficult process. You got to have 34 states to call it. You then have the delegates go. They're subject to their state laws. The state legislatures appoint them. They can recall them. They can punish them if they take any vote that's outside of their jurisdiction, including with jail sentences. So it's a pretty serious thing. But once they're there, they will then have to have a vote, a majority vote of the convention to propose an amendment. We might have an idea that we really want, I'll give you an example, congressional term limits, but maybe you can't get a majority vote for that. Well, it's not going to happen then. But let's say they do propose something that's out there, like they're going to repeal the Second Amendment. That exceeds their authority. The first step is somebody calls a point of order in the convention, and they would overrule that. The second step is a majority of the delegates wouldn't vote for it. And even if they did, even if all these, and nobody got recalled and nobody got sent to jail, and God forbid they proposed it, you got to have 38 states to ratify anything that comes from there. So that's what I've been telling the very few colleagues of mine that have that concern. Look, it's a very robust process. It's a very difficult process. The chance of anything negative coming out of this is very, very, very low. And the chance of anything passing and amending the Constitution that takes away liberty or anything like that is impossible, frankly impossible. Look, anything is in a raw sense possible, like an asteroid could hit the Earth. But I don't deal in remote possibilities. I deal in practical realities. And it is practically impossible that you're going to have a bad amendment get approved and then voted on by 38 states.
Yeah, a way I put it is it possible for Jonathan Viod to become president of the United States? Yes, it's possible. Is it likely? No. No, that's not going to happen.
Don't sell yourself short.
I appreciate that.
I'm probably
so I am confident. So I am confident that we have a ton of Texans watching this program right now. if you could ask our supporters to take one action to provide you with some help this session, what would that action be?
First off, if your state representative has either signed on or indicated they're going to vote for it, just thank them. Just thank them for doing so. If your state representative hasn't, feel free to reach out to them kindly, respectfully. Don't be too pushy, but just kind of reach out to them and just let them know what you're thinking and what you believe. Every representative here in Austin wants to hear from their constituents. I've not met anybody that doesn't. And so they'd love to hear from you. They'd like to know that it's a priority for you. And if they have questions, that you can answer them and that you can, bridge this issue with them, whatever concerns they may have, if they have any. I think just be supportive and encouraging and make your voice heard. That's ultimately what you can do.
What would you say is the best method to speak with someone in your legislator's office or speak with your legislator? Is it sending an email? Is it making a phone call, showing up in Austin and talking with them? Anyone in particular that you think is most effective?
It depends on the representative. I can tell you what I see. If you know the representative already and you see him at an event, and you get an opportunity organically to chat with them, just kind of say, hey, how are you doing? Hey, I want to let you know I'm really passionate about Convention of States and reigning in the federal government. Encourage you to sign on and vote for HJR 98 or SJR 54, depending on which one's over here. That's probably one of the best ways, the organic in-person conversation. Second, if you got an opportunity to come up and to Austin and come visit the office, that does wonders. That is a very difficult thing to do. And so when people show up, we listen. The second thing I'd say, phone calls or emails are probably about the same. Give a call to the office. Just let the staff know that you want your representative to vote for HJR 98 and have them kind of take that down, and they will relay that to their representative, and they do keep track of that. And then lastly, emails the same way. We have an email on our House website. If you go to our pages on the House website, house.texas.gov, you can click the contact or email me button. I can't remember exactly what it says, but fill out that form and send it in that way. That gives you the highest level of recognition, as opposed to sending a direct email to your rep's email address or clicking a button and having some other service send an email, because sometimes those will seem like junk. And let me last say this: whatever you convey, just be genuine. Be short, be concise, but say what you think, right? Don't just copy and paste what somebody else says. Just speak your mind. And I think you'll get the most attention, the most bang for your buck that way.
Yeah, I think sharing a personal story or why it means so much to you is what will be most effective to legislators. And, sometimes we try to help people and put together things and ask them to send a message, and we even give them a template and things of that nature. But folks, if you do receive that from us, I do highly encourage you to input your own personal testimony. Absolutely. Because that's what's going to resonate the most with legislators.
Yep.
And I would also say, folks, if you plan on going to Austin and you're a little intimidated, it's Texas. Everything is big, and that capital is huge. Don't be intimidated, because we've got a lot of great activists that are there quite often. We've got the Bonner brothers. We've got Cindy Phillips, John Van Campenol, Erica Hatfield. So many of our activists are there throughout the session. So please, if you sign up, feel free to reach out to our team, and there will be people there that can help guide you and direct you to where you need to go. And I'm sure Representative Vasut knows all about our activists, because I think they are constantly in his office and talking with him.
Absolutely. We love it when they stop by.
So, of course, Representative Vasut, Convention of States is not the only piece of legislation that's being considered this session. Of course, it would make our lives much easier if it were, but it's not. Now, I believe Governor Abbott's top legislative priority this year is school choice. I believe both the House and Senate have versions of legislation that provide for education savings accounts. I know our friends at Texas Public Policy Foundation have also been championing school choice. So I was just curious, how do you feel about the issue and the legislation that you've seen so far? And do you think it will get done this session?
It will absolutely get done. We have the votes in the House and Senate. The Senate, of course, has already passed it with SB 2. We're going to take up HB 3, the House proposal, next week. In committee. They're going to hear testimony on it. There may be some revisions. I don't think very many. And then it'll come to the floor maybe mid to late March. And it'll pass. We have the votes. So, look, that issue is primarily a civil rights issue. It's about ensuring, in my mind, what I always go to is the single mom. in an urban area, working 2 jobs trying to make ends meet, doesn't have the time to be able to homeschool her child, can't afford private school in that area at the moment, and is therefore locked into a public school. And maybe that public school is not good for her kid for whatever reason. A lot of times people will focus on, well, maybe the public school is just terrible. Well, maybe it's a great public school, but that child doesn't learn well in that environment and would learn better in a private school that's nearby. Well, our Constitution calls on us as a state to provide a free public system of education. That doesn't mean it has to be traditional ISDs or charters. It can be any number of programs. And the ESA is just yet another program to deliver quality education to the people of Texas. And what's unique about it is it's about giving that single mom a choice, a meaningful choice. She already has that base choice right now. We all know you can pick private and homeschool and public. Nothing's illegal. You get those options. But the question is whether it's meaningful. And for that single mom, it's not a meaningful opportunity if she doesn't have the financial resources to be able to do it. And ultimately, what our education system needs to be about is making sure our children receive high quality education in an environment that's best for them. And choice provides that opportunity.
That is so well stated, sir. I really appreciate you illustrating that to folks, because I know there have been some people that have been concerned about what the ramifications would be of opening things up. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing when we provide people with more choices and options. I don't think that anyone has ever really seen an issue with there being too many choices or too many options available. And as you point out, there are some people that are just in a difficult position for one reason or another, and they may need to tap into utilizing these options and getting their kid the best education that we all want for our children.
Absolutely. We also need to take care of our public schools. We've got HB2, $8 billion in additional funding to make sure our public schools have the resources they need. I don't think that HB3 is going to negatively affect our public schools. I don't believe that at all. And then I think, some of the concerns you kind of alluded to that some may have on the conservative side, look, this is an entirely voluntarily opt-in program. If you don't want to participate, don't participate. And the program itself has very robust protections for conscience, for religious liberty. Basically, there's language in the bill that says by accepting an ESA, that doesn't give the government any right to regulate the private school or homeschool curriculum or operations or anything of the sort. And so I think it's a good program, and I think it'll benefit all of our kids in Texas, both directly, those that participate, and indirectly by raising the educational quality for the whole state.
Very, very important things. So, Representative Vasut, any other last comments that you would have for our viewers, whether it be about Convention of States or this legislative session in general? And folks, for those of you who don't know, Texas doesn't meet every year. They don't have a legislative session every year. It's every other year. So the last session, that's why we were talking about 2023 earlier. This is now the next session. And at the end of May, this concludes, and there won't be another session until 2027. So any thoughts, comments, or anything that you'd like to share with our audience?
We always covet your prayers for wisdom. We've got a lot of legislation that we take up in a very short period of time. Just like you mentioned, 140 days every other year, January through usually May. This time it goes through June 2nd, just the way the calendar goes. So we've got a lot to do, a lot of votes to take. People will reach out to me and they'll ask about a vote on a particular bill, and we don't get it always right. I mean, we probably cast more than 2,000 votes each session. So, but we welcome your prayers of wisdom. Any information that you have. And I'll tell you this, if you got something you're passionate about, you want to make sure that your legislator knows how you feel, please reach out to them. But, the worst thing you can do is be very passionate about an issue, and then your legislator votes a way that you don't agree with, and you go and confront them after the fact. And you say, well, why did you vote that way? And maybe that legislator didn't have the information that you did and didn't have that information. And when you share it to them after the fact, I mean, the vote's done. The vote is cast. So share it early, share it when you get a chance, and make your voice heard on the front end before we take these votes. That's the most important thing.
Well, Representative Vasut, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And it's interesting. Many times our activists are chasing after champions. It's not often that a champion comes to us, let alone at a convention. But we are so blessed that you did stop by our table, and we are grateful for everything that you're doing for us there in Texas. So thank you, sir. And if there's anything more that we can do to help you, please just let us know.
Thank you very much for everything you guys do. Let's go rein in the government, the federal government, that is.
Amen. God bless. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Yeah, that was a great conversation with Representative Vasut. He is a true champion of ours. We're blessed to have him working hard there in Texas. And I want to encourage you, if you are in Texas and you haven't done so already, please make sure you sign that petition. And if you've done that and you'd like to help out more, go ahead and sign up. Go to conventionofstates.com/act. Sign up to become a volunteer activist. We won't be asking too much of you, but by doing that, you'll be connected with our team. You'll be able to show up at the Capitol if you'd like, or you can just learn more about what we're trying to accomplish and help us out when you can. I understand people are busy, lots of things going on, but we could really, really use some additional support in Texas. So if you're there and you haven't signed the petition, do that. If you're willing, sign up to become a volunteer activist and help us with these calls to action. We'd really, really appreciate that. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to Action at Home. Okay, so Action at Home, this is the segment of the program where we always strive to bring you something that you can do to help the COS movement from the comfort of your own home. And tonight we have an important action that you can take. And this is an action, in my opinion, that helps set Convention of States apart from other organizations, other conservative organizations or like-minded organizations. And the reason for that is because earlier in the program, I shared with you the goal of COS, which is ultimately to get to an Article 5 convention, and the mission, which is to restore or reestablish a culture of self-governance. However, Convention of States also has an aspirational goal, which is to inspire a political and spiritual awakening in America. Okay, so we have our goal, we have our mission, and then we have our aspirational goal. You can find all of these on the website. Now, part of our core values at Convention of States is to revere the Judeo-Christian values upon which our republic was built. So to that end, we have a national prayer warrior team that you may join using our Take Action page. The prayer warrior team meets nationally once a month and is also provided with a prayer calendar full of special requests. Now, we've been talking about Texas tonight, so I would be remiss if I didn't note that really the idea of the prayer warrior team began in Texas. I want to say it was around 2015, 2016, and this is a great opportunity this was a great opportunity that our activists came up with, where they were trying to figure out a way to better build a relationship with legislators, and they totally bought into the model of servant leadership within Convention of States. And so what the Texas team did back then and has continued, here we are almost 10 years later, they've continued to do this despite leadership changes and what have you, is every month they take a group of their team, calls the Texas legislators to speak with either the legislators themselves or people in their office. And they simply ask, is there anything that we can pray for you or for the legislator, pray on your behalf? This is the type of servant leadership, again, that sets our activists apart from other organizations. And many state legislators have been blown away by this request. Many times when legislators hear from people in the public, a lot of times, unfortunately, it's, why did you vote this way? Can you do this for me? Why aren't you doing that? And here we are. We're not calling to ask them anything, right? We're not trying to accomplish anything other than to pray for them, to build a relationship with them and let them know that we appreciate their service, we care for them, and we love them. Regardless of where they come down on any particular issue, we love our neighbor. And that is what our prayer warrior team is all about. So if you want to be a part of this team, if you don't have a lot of time to dedicate to Convention of States, one of the most important things you can do is pray for us and pray for our legislators, pray for our teams, so you can become a member of the Prayer Warrior team. Again, if you're interested, go on over to conventionofstates.com/act, and you'll be able to select Prayer Warrior as one of the roles that you can sign up for. So I encourage you to do so. All right, now let's check the Minuteman mailbag. All right. Well, I'm excited to answer another important question submitted by one of our great grassroots activists. And tonight, Art Binhack wrote in asking, from your perspective, what is the most important thing the grassroots can do to advance the Convention of States Article 5 movement? This is a really good, and in my opinion, an important question. So thank you, Art, for submitting that. Now, since you did not specify if you meant grassroots activists or grassroots supporters, I'm going to take the opportunity to answer both. So for one, if you are a supporter of Convention of States and you have not done this already, I would say the most important thing you can do is sign the petition. So for those of you who do not know, the petition is really a letter that is generated in the signee's name and sent to their legislators, informing them that the signee is a supporter of Article 5 and calling on the legislator to take action to support or defend the COS resolution, right? In past states, we've already passed it. So we're asking them basically, will you commit to defending our resolution? And in the states where we've yet to pass, we're asking them to support it. And that was referenced in that video that we showed earlier there in Rhode Island, where that legislator says we're hearing from people more and more each year. Those are the people that are signing the petition, right? So that's one of the most important things that you, or probably the most important thing that you can do, because this is the backbone of our legislative strategy, and it is vitally important to what we seek to accomplish within our movement as we grow our ranks amongst our supporter base. So if you haven't done so, I would say the most important thing you can do is sign the petition. Now, if you've already signed the petition, I'd recommend that you make sure you are opted into emails and texts from Convention of States. And the reason for that is because we will be asking for your help with our calls to action. Now, regardless of which state you live in, it doesn't matter where you reside, past state, non-past state, deep blue state, red state, purple state. We have grassroots teams working hard on legislative strategy across the country. And in almost all of those instances, it will include a call to action to advance either our COS resolution, 34 ready legislation. This is legislation that we talked about last month, and it will prepare a state for when we ultimately get to convention, or F3 legislation, non-COS legislation, pro-liberty legislation. I explained it before. It promotes freedom, federalism, fundamental rights. We're supporting all those types of legislation, and in order for us to be successful in advocating for them, we put together these calls to action and we send it out to supporters. Well, the best way for this to be advanced is by constituents engaging with their legislators. So we typically ask you to contact your legislator and let them know you support any one of the things that we are supporting. And we need you. So we really need your help with these calls to action. So please make sure you're opted in and ready to respond to them. And finally, if you are a member of one of our grassroots teams, or a member of our grassroots army, the most important thing you can do to help advance our movement, in my opinion, is through outreach. At the core of the Convention of States movement, it is about establishing or building relationships. Relationship building. That is where we are at. For us to truly succeed at restoring the culture of self-governance and rescuing America from the brink, we must have an engaged and active citizenry. I've said it before, if we had convention tomorrow and we got all the things we wanted, would everything change? Things would change, definitely for the better, but I think we'd ultimately find ourselves back to where we are. And that's why our mission at Convention of States is to build that engaged army of self-governing grassroots activists, because we need an engaged, active citizenry to protect and to advance our system of government and our way of life. So in order for us to reach, teach, and activate new people, we must be developing relationships. So if you are an activist, regardless of the role that you have, I'd recommend you start working on hosting meetings to share more about Convention of States. You can host a meeting from the comfort of your own home, like we're talking about tonight, or at a local library or a place of business, or even at a coffee shop. I think I've heard some states in the Northeast run on Dunkin', and that's because they get together at Dunkin' Donuts and have these conversations. So wherever you're most comfortable, definitely have a group, or get a group together and have a conversation. You can also hone your elevator pitch to share the COS message when out and about, or find events where you can encourage people to sign the petition. Again, if we truly want to succeed in our mission, not just our goal, but in our mission, we have to be building relationships. And this is best done at in-person meetings and events, or when you're just talking to someone when you're out and about. So that, I would say, is the most important thing you can do. Again, a really great question, important question from Art. Thank you so much for writing in. All right, now let's move to COS Voices. Okay, so as I mentioned on our last show, during this segment of the program, we typically hear from activists as they answer the question, how can I effectively communicate the COS message quickly, right? So kind of an elevator pitch, and we hear from our activists on that. However, we're still in the heart of legislative season, if you will, and we've got a lot of things that are going on, a lot of committee hearings and testimony that's being given. So like last month, tonight we're going to hear some amazing testimony from our grassroots activists on our Montana team, and that is Sandy Dunning.
My name is Sandy Dunning. I live in Shepherd, Montana, and I've been a volunteer with Convention of States for a number of years. There are 2 amendment proposal pathways as defined in the language of Article 5. The Convention of States pathway presents a much higher bar. It requires the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states to pass a resolution to formally make an application for a Convention of States meeting. That means 34 states must call for a convention and agree on all the topics. The 34 individual resolutions must tightly aggregate. Only when 34 state legislatures have passed the same resolution can the call occur. So far, 19 states have passed legislation for a convention to propose amendments, and they are strictly limited to 1, imposing fiscal restraints on the federal government, 2, limiting the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, and 3, imposing term limits on Congress and federal officials. We ask that you support the resolution and formally add Montana to the list.
Wow, excellent work there, Sandy. And once again, our activists do an amazing job at these committee hearings. They're always willing to show up, stand up, and speak up. And I could not be prouder of all of the activists across the country that are willing to do that. And they're always very well prepared as well. So wonderful job, Sandy. Great job, Montana. Keep up the great work. Well, folks, just as a reminder, all of our COS at Home shows are aired on the first Wednesday of every month at 8 o'clock Eastern time. And we strive for these shows to be live shows. And again, I ask for your forgiveness for pre-recording tonight's program, but we do intend to be back live on Wednesday, April 2nd for our next show, which is going to be at 8 o'clock Eastern. And I am excited to announce that our guest for that show is going to be Tim Barton, the president of Wall Builders. He's going to be returning to the program. We had Tim on a few years ago, and I'm really excited to have him come back and talk to us. I think it's going to be a fascinating conversation, and I hope that you will join us for that. It's going to be great. Tim is just an excellent supporter of Convention of States, and they're doing incredible work at Wall Builders, and it's a great partnership we have with them. So join us April 2nd, 8 o'clock Eastern with Tim Barton. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, this has been a ton of fun. I really enjoyed taking the time and connecting with you and talking about Convention of States. And I hope that this show has not only been enjoyable to you, but also helpful to you. Thanks again to Representative Cody Vasut for joining us tonight. And a big thanks, as always, to the legend Producer G for all of his hard work behind the scenes. Really couldn't do it without him. So thank you, Garrett, for everything that you do. But the greatest thanks of all goes to you, the supporters and activists within our Convention of States Article 5 movement. It's important to remember that despite all the problems we face as a country, we have to remember you and we the people are the solution. So thank you again for all that you do. Have a wonderful evening, and God bless. Former congressman from the great state of my state, Florida.
When I hear people talk about progressivism, socialism, Marxism, communism, all of those things are the antithesis to our Constitution. And again, that's why the founding fathers put Article 5 in there.
I don't want my kids to live anywhere else, and I don't want them to live without living free.
One of the top questions that we get is, how can I effectively communicate the COS message quickly? each COS at home, we're going to take a minute to go through one of these elevator pitches.
I was just compelled by the sheer logic of the Convention of States project plan.
You continue on down the Convention of States website, you'll eventually arrive at the progress map. But if you click on one of those states, what this system will do is it will automatically update.
As a direct result of that simulation, that we're going to be really supportive of your effort moving forward.
Iowa, we've already passed through subcommittee and committee in the House, and we need to make a final push to get it through the House chamber.
Exert the will of the majority of the people that want a balanced budget, they want term limits.
We need some things that are going to reverse course and start taking power out of Washington.
I think it's very well our last opportunity to save our Constitution
and alter the government from the standpoint of changing the jurisdictions back to what they were intended to be, which is what we're all about at the Convention of States.
There's no other organization that has grassroots in every state and going to every state legislature when the state legislature is open.